Hey everyone, we've created a power button before and now it's time to animate it. Let me show you a simple way of animating a power button in Photoshop. In this tutorial, I'm not going to go through the process of creating the actual design of this button. I've used bits and pieces from my Siri icon tutorial and my power button tutorial. You can find both of these tutorials along with the PSD file for this tutorial at iceflowstudios.com right now. The PSD contains two versions of the power symbol, one layer that's turned off and one layer that contains all of the glows. Transitioning between the two symbols is quite simple, but we need to take care of something quite crucial before we begin. Photoshop doesn't animate layer styles that well. If we were to create an animation using the glowing symbol with the layer styles attached, Photoshop won't activate some of the layer styles until the last frame of that animation. We can solve this issue quite simply. Head up to the filter menu and then convert this layer for smart filters. This will essentially flatten your layer, allowing Photoshop to seamlessly animate between the two layers. At any point you want to change your layer styles, simply double-click on the layer's thumbnail in the Layers panel. Now we're ready to animate. In order to animate within Photoshop, we need to reveal our animation panel. Head up to the window menu and then click on Animation to bring up your timeline. It's going to appear at the bottom of your workspace. However, we don't want to animate using the timeline, but instead we want to animate frame by frame. Click on the Convert to Frame Animation button on the far right side of your timeline. You should now see the frames view in your animation panel. At this point, there are a few small things that need to be done before we animate. First, you might notice the 10-second text below the first frame. This tells us how long each frame will be held for. As we're looking for a smooth animation, we can safely change this to no delay by clicking on the small black arrow beside the time. The next thing that needs to be done is we need to create our initial view. Do you want your animation to start with the power button on or off? Assuming you want the power button to start in the off position when the animation starts, set the opacity of the glowing symbol to 0%. You should only see the dark power button visible at this point. We now need to set the glowing view. In your animation panel, click on the Duplicate Selected Frames button to create a new frame beside your current frame. Now, just like we set the opacity of the glowing symbol to 0% for our initial view, we now want to set the opacity to 100% in order to fully reveal the glowing layer. Your glowing symbol should be fully visible at this point. Now that we have both frames set up, we need to create the transitioning frames. Lucky for us, Photoshop has a really simple way of doing this: tweening. At the bottom of your animation panel, there's a Tweens Animation Frames button. Pressing this button will pop up a new window with a few options. If your second frame is selected, you'll want to set Tween Width to Previous Frame. Now the frames to add will define how fast or how slow your animation will be. 7 frames should give you a nice on effect. Press OK to create our 7 new frames. A nice transition has now been created between our 2 frames. Pressing the play button will allow us to preview the animation. Now you have to note that the first time you play back your animation, it may seem a little bit choppy as Photoshop is rendering that animation. From here, there are a few options. If you want the animation to simply turn on, then you can leave the animation as is. However, we're going to go a little bit further and create a throbbing animation. To create the off animation, we essentially want to do the exact same thing except for one small change. Instead of transitioning right into the off animation, we're going to add a slight pause. On the last frame of your animation, change the delay to a higher number than 0, such as 1 second. This will put a slight pause after the button turns on. Now we need to create the backwards animation. Just like we did earlier, press the Duplicate Selected Frames button to create a new frame, and make sure to change the delay on the new frame to no delay. When that frame is created, turn the opacity of the glowing layer back down to 0%. Once the opacity for this new frame is set, it's time to tween it. Just like we did before, click on the Tween button at the bottom of your animations panel and choose your desired frames. I'm going to add a few extra frames for this animation to give it a stronger throb effect. At this point, you may notice that all your new frames have been set to 1 second. To fix this, hold down your Shift key and then click on the second frame with the adjusted time. This will select all the frames in between. When those frames are selected, click on any of the black arrows and change the delay to no delay. Your animation is now complete. Now to save this animation, head up to the File menu and then click on Save for Web and Devices. When you're in this dialog box, you want to make sure to save your image as a GIF. This ensures that it will animate when you save it. And then down below we have our looping options. This will allow us to either loop the animation just once or forever. And there you go, a glowing power button animation in Photoshop. If you want to read this tutorial or download the PSD file, it's available right now on iceflowstudios.com. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like it, favorite it, comment on it, subscribe, and take care.